You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast. But we digress. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to our Jurassic Park mini-series of science review thing that we're doing for June. We have done 2 episodes so far, as we watch each Jurassic Park movie again and consider the science. This episode, we are talking about Jurassic Park III. As with the other episodes so far, we're reviewing the movies, but since we're not film critics, we're not talking about acting or filmmaking type art, but we are scientists, so we are reviewing the science. Not just the little nitpicky things, but the broad subject, the broad context where the science intersects the pop culture. As we said, today's subject is Jurassic Park III, released in 2001. Universal Studios, as always, directed by Joe Johnston. In this movie, Dr. Alan Grant is convinced to return to Site B, the other island, where everybody goes to the island and they get stuck and things go terribly wrong and there's dinosaurs and they attack people. Pretty familiar stuff. As always, we are putting up the spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the movie and you care about that, don't listen to this, because we're going to talk about a lot of the stuff that happens in it.
Turn back now.
Well, let's jump right in then and start the place that we always like to start by talking about the critters. Will, what are some of the new critters that we get to see in Jurassic Park 3?
We get to see a few new ones. The big deal one, which we'll be discussing quite heavily, most likely during this discussion, is the Spinosaurus, the new big predator of the movie. A couple of other herbivores. We get a Corythosaurus, another a crested duck-billed hadrosaur.
We do. I almost missed it.
I know.
They go by really quick.
They do. They stampede across. I always liked them because my brother's name's Cory, and so it was his dinosaur when we were little. And then we get some Ankylosauruses.
We do.
Just for a moment beneath their tree. And then finally, the only time, and it's only there for like a few seconds, but the only time I've ever gotten to see one of my favorite dinosaurs on the big screen is a Ceratosaurus shows up and
yes, it does.
Sniffs them when they're covered in poo, gives a weird comedic look at the camera, and then walks away.
Yeah, it's an odd moment. Showing off its nose.
Yep.
And then we also get some of the old things, right? We see a T-Rex, we see the Velociraptors.
Yep. We get updates for a lot of things. We see updated Velociraptors. We also get to see Pterosaurs actually do something. The Pteranodons actually get to play a role in this story.
They have a scene.
We see a few others that just kind of pop up in the background.
We do. One of the things that we've talked each episode so far about sort of where the science was at this time and how that relates to the film. And one of the things that really stands out to me is that they chose to include Spinosaurus.
Yes.
This is a dinosaur that wasn't in the books, that they sort of picked out of current events. Through the 1990s, Spinosaurus and its cousins, the Spinosaurids, were getting a lot more study and a lot more attention. So this was a dinosaur that was seeing a bit of revived popularity in real-life paleontology that they decided to put into the movie, which I think is actually really cool. It's really nice that they did that.
Yeah, that they were trying to bring in recent discoveries, species wise.
Of course, the biggest feature of the Spinosaurus, I think, is that it fits this trope that we've been talking about for the last couple episodes. We keep bringing up this term, monsterification. Copyright Common Descent Podcast. The Spinosaurus is a big old monster.
It so is.
And I don't mean that like it's a beast. I mean it's a movie monster.
In the shape of a dinosaur.
In the shape of a dinosaur. And it starts to show some of the classic signatures of when you'll see a movie take an animal and adjust it to be a movie monster. Make it start behaving in ways that make less sense as an animal and more sense as a monster.
And really, a lot of these things that fall into this list is if you just think about the classic slasher movie characters, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, those Jason is fully, but Michael is one of those where he's semi-supernatural killers. He seems to be immune to danger. He seems to be super strong, even though should just be a dude. It's a lot of those things. They have immaculate timing and are always in the wrong place at the right time to kill someone.
Yep, they know where people are going to be. They catch up even though they're not running.
Yep, and so a lot of those things fall into what they do to creatures, which makes sense when you're trying to make a monster.
The biggest two, I think the most obvious two that we see with the Spinosaurus is that it has the superhero durability and super strength.
Yes, it does.
Thing that movies like to give animals super strength to make them more intimidating. The Spinosaurus is like beating up a plane.
It's bashing apart planes. It's running through. The one part that really gets me is when it runs through a fence, obviously made to hold back dinosaurs of its size.
Yeah, when you say fence, this isn't like a picket fence.
Yes.
This is huge, topped with. It's not even barbed wire.
No, they're like railroad spikes.
Yes. The whole thing's made of giant metal poles and stuff. It shoves its face through the airplane.
Yes, it does.
Through the metal and glass of the side of the airplane. It's kicking it around.
It headbutts a crane. It just smashes it with its face.
When the Spinosaurus and the T-Rex are fighting, not only does it finish the fight by throwing the T-Rex.
Yes.
They knock over at least one tree.
Yeah.
Not like a sapling, like a tree. They're this sort of force of nature, this supernatural almost. They got super strength. They've got the monster-y super strength.
And the thing that also tends to go along with that, which is almost always, and I mean, it's there for even very lightly monstrified animals in movies, but is that hyper-aggression.
Yes.
And that is, man, does Spinosaurus have that in spades. It is out to kill everything. Like, it kills a dude. It immediately somehow catches up with the crashed plane and kills the plane. And like, as soon as it locks eyes with T-Rex, it goes to kill the T-Rex. There's even the line that says that it's attracted by your T-Rex urine to look for a fight, I guess. I don't know why that would be.
Maybe they're suggesting that it's territorial.
Yeah.
That's kind of the impression I get, that they're like, okay, it's super territorial, which isn't so unfathomable, but it feeds into that this is a scary, aggressive thing rather than this is an animal acting like, it doesn't ever seem curious like the T-Rex did in the first Jurassic Park.
It's if something moves, it's going to try to kill it. And there are hyper-aggressive animals. Like, there are definitely animals that are behaviorally noted to be extremely aggressive. Saltwater crocodiles are one of those. There are certain breeds of dogs that are noted to be much more aggressive because of how they were bred. So I mean, you get a lot of that stuff in nature, but that doesn't mean that they're that way all the time. And that also doesn't mean that they're constantly ready to fight to the death.
Yeah, it's got that heightened aggression, that durability, which we'll talk about more next movie. But the other animals too, there's throughout them, there's this interesting thread in Jurassic Park 3 of a couple of cool new things mixed in with these, more so than we've seen before, these movie monster-like attributes to them. Let's talk about the Pterosaurs.
Yes, the Pterosaurs definitely have some of that hyper-aggression. So in this one, we get to see them go inside a big birdhouse.
Yes.
And encounter some pterosaurs, some pteranodons that have been stuck in there and immediately are beset upon them. So it's got a little bit of that hyper, and you could argue that maybe they've been trapped in a cage, so they're starving. Food is, there's a river running through it, so I assume they've been catching fish, but you could argue that these are starving animals, even though they seem to be a bunch of them that are having babies, so only so starving. But it's one of those things where it was cool to see them, but they also have a lot of things that they do that are not possible. First and foremost, having teeth.
They do have teeth. I noticed that.
Yep.
Looking close. I will say I really liked seeing the pterosaurs walk quadrupedally.
That was actually very cool in how they made them move around.
I really because that's now the confirmed way that we understand them to have moved.
Yeah.
that they were quadrupedal walkers. And for all the other weird stuff about this movie, the moment where the pterosaur walks out of the fog on the bridge is really cool.
It has still some neat moments. I really did like that. And the way they had the babies move around, I thought was really cool too. That they were on all fours and then they would just kind of like hop and flap to move to places, but they weren't fluttering around like a swarm.
Yes.
That was definitely a nice touch.
They also do movies. Pterosaurs, I feel so bad for pterosaurs. I've said this before. Like dinosaurs, at least some movies try. I don't think pterosaurs in movies have improved since like the 30s.
No, not really.
The biggest thing, of course, and this movies do this. I don't know a movie that doesn't do this. They have talon feet.
Yes, they do.
They grab people and they pick them up. And we don't have to go into the details of why they can't do that. There's strength limitations and the fact, but the big thing is, of course, the fact that their feet don't bend that way. We saw this at the end of the second movie. There's a pterosaur that perches.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the second movie, there's a little moment at the end of this one. This is a side note where the door is left unlocked to the pterosaur house.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we see them flying away. And the implication there is like, oh, you left the door open and now the pterosaurs are out.
Yep.
But there was a pterosaur just flying around in the second one.
I was going to say, that was one of the things I noticed. I had it here in my notes. That we saw one flying around. This is supposed to be the same island.
Yeah.
But now they're in a cage. It also, that is one thing this movie has. The island is portrayed differently. It's much more ramshackle and run down and post-apocalyptic feeling. While
it is,
we only see one facility like that in Lost World. The rest of the island is much more just a verdant paradise of dinosaurs being in their environment.
And that's another thing I was going to mention. So it kind of goes along with the monster stuff. And this was something I noticed. I remembered the Spinosaurus being more monstery than it was upon rewatching this movie, because it's doing it's punching things around, but it's not, it doesn't do anything so ridiculous that it threw me off. And I realized that the reason I remember the dinosaurs in this movie being more monstery than I even noticed them upon rewatching is because the movie keeps framing them that way.
Yes, they do.
In the beginning of the movie, people keep saying like they're getting army, they're like these military style dudes. Grant's like, there's no such thing as safe on this island. We have to leave the island now.
You'll be lucky if you get off this island alive.
The big beefy guys who were blowing up airplanes run into the forest, apparently see the Spinosaurus and come wetting themselves running back out.
Yep.
There's this, the movie builds up the island as a place of death and that's where I think the monster stuff is most heavily suggested, not even when the dinosaurs are in the scene.
Absolutely. And this will be slightly cutting into topics we'll get into a little bit later in this discussion, but to harp on that monster metaphor, we made the point in the first one that Grant goes out of his way to say they're not monsters, they're animals.
Yes,
in this movie,
and in this one,
he actually completely flips. And the whole point is that he's supposed to have been jaded due to his experience in the first movie, but he has a line at the beginning where he said, dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. The only ones that are left are fossilized in rocks. What Hammond and Engine created are movie monsters, nothing more, nothing less.
Yes, the movie is framing them very differently in this film.
And I feel like there's times where it feels like they're trying to say that, yes, they are monsters, and then other times where it's like, no, you've been jaded. Here's a heartwarming river moment with the dinosaurs. And and then the end when the pterosaurs are flying away, it's hopeful almost. Like it's like almost a hopeful. And so it's like they keep going back and forth on whether they're monsters or not. Some of them are shown to be sympathetic, some of them are shown to be monstrous, which is very odd. The dinosaurs don't have a common theme like they did in the first one, where these are just animals that are sometimes dangerous. Some of them are monsters, because the compies still get that treatment. When he hears that there are compies, he shuts the hatch to his little truck that the kid's been hiding in. Because, I can deal with raptors, but compies, that kind of mentality.
I want to come back to that point before we finish this section up. But let's talk about the Raptors. Let's make some notes about Raptors real quick.
The Raptors are interesting in this one.
There's some cool new stuff. They've got feathers.
Yep. They got some quills.
That was sort of the little quills. I love that they're sexually dimorphic.
I know. That was
the
such
males and females look different. That's so
subtle
cool.
touch. I liked that they don't harp on it, and it also seems to be a matriarch female, that she's the one leading the pack.
Yeah.
Which was a cool interpretation, especially if as reptiles, like some do, if they were different sizes, if the female was bigger, that makes sense. And they show her to be the more dominant, the more impressive, also like more calm and calculating,
and they continue a little bit that theme of parenthood.
Yes, they do.
And sociality that we saw in the second movie.
Group nesting, protecting of their eggs, and working together to protect. It's one of those where the entire pack works to protect the eggs, not just parental.
Yes, which we see in some animals.
Yes,
that's the thing we've seen. And of course, they continue the notion of them being super intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned in the first movie that I'm always interested to see how they choose to portray intelligence.
And it's weird in this one.
This one goes pretty far with it. Like Grant starts in the beginning where if they hadn't gone extinct, they might have been the dominant species on the planet instead of us. And then by the end of the movie, they're having a parlay with the humans.
Yeah.
Like they're negotiating the return of the eggs that they stole. And it's it's interesting because they don't even seem like monsters to me in that scene. They seem like aliens.
Yeah.
They seems like a species that we don't speak the same language. And it's like when they're talking to the alien in Independence Day.
But perhaps in another lifetime we could have been friends. Yeah.
Yes.
It's got kind of that we are equals, just of two different worlds. The weird thing for me, because in the first one you mentioned it was weird that they used door opening as a sign of intelligence. In this one, Grant's whole realization that they were actually hyper intelligent is based off their resonating chamber.
Yeah, that they're communicative.
That they can make noises.
But we knew that in the first one.
We knew that, and it's also one of those things where it's like, yes, but parrots can make noises, and not all parrots are actually intelligent. They're just good. They can learn sounds and songs, but they're not. There's not all parrots can solve puzzles like a crow or. That's a weird one for the fact that just because they can make complicated noises does not mean they were. That they were definitely talking and hyper intelligent.
Yeah, there'll be some more to say about that when we talk about the science in the movie. But then there are a couple of moments where the Raptors do get a little monstery. That's classic monstery stuff. The main one, and I thought this was so funny because the first thing we see a raptor do in this movie is jump through glass.
Yes, it does.
I don't know what it is with these. They love having the Raptors jump through glass. It jumps through the glass in the after it's posed dramatically.
Yeah, after it's pretending to be a cadaver.
The thing. And then they kill poor Udesky. I liked Udesky.
Yeah.
They kill him for no reason. Like the one raptor, almost like angrily. It's almost like a sign to the other people.
They kill him, and this is something I noticed watching it this time. They kill him in a very weird way, because it's also the same way the Spinosaurus takes on the T-Rex, by breaking their neck.
Yeah.
They snap their neck like an action hero in a movie, which, first off, is not how you kill people. Like, that doesn't actually work. You can't snap someone's neck that easily, and even if you did, you could just very likely paralyze them, but not kill them. Like,
right.
That's not how necks work. Also, why in the world do animals know to just snap an animal's neck? That's a weird thing that they use twice with two different animals in this.
Yeah, I like your comparison to action movie.
It's an action movie.
They're like
move.
action movie. They're jumping through glass. They're snapping necks.
Mm-hmm.
That's
it was
interesting.
Weird. When I was little, I always just thought he had bitten his head and started to eat him. And then on this time, I realized no, he snapped his neck and then left. I always thought it was weird that he started eating him from the head because that's not where the meat is.
I used to think the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's they have a little bit, and it's part of that hyper-intelligence that they're trying to portray them as super intelligent, but it's almost to the point where they're it's not realistic. It's not a believable thing of you're doing things that are counterintuitive to what an animal would need to do.
Yeah. So the dinosaurs, the animals in general in this movie are this odd mixture of some cool, animal stuff, some cool dinosaur stuff, and then being like action stars doing that monster, more movie monstery stuff.
It's a weird balance.
One other thing that I noticed talking about sort of the framing of the film, and this is a really minor thing, but compared to the last two movies, there are no moments in Jurassic Park 3 where there are any threats that aren't animals.
Yes, that was something that stood out in this one. The animals are trials for the main characters to get past. They have to survive the Spinosaurus, then they have to survive the Raptors, then they have to survive the Pteranodons, then they have to survive the Spinosaurus again.
Yeah, in the other movie, there was the car falling down the tree, there was the trailer thing, there's the electric fence. The dinosaurs are among the dangers you encounter, dealing with all this stuff. In this movie, it's dinosaurs bad and scary.
Yeah.
That's the only threat you could... It's as though if there weren't dinosaurs, being trapped on this island would be perfectly fine.
Yep.
They're the big threat. They're the creature, the demon creatures of the island.
One of the other things that's missing from this one, we get the one scene where they're on the river and all the dinosaurs come over to look at them, and that's supposed to be a touching moment. But in the other two, not only do we get to have cool, beautiful moments with the dinosaurs, we also have moments where the people help the dinosaurs.
Yeah, I noticed that too. This movie, there's no sick Triceratops. Nope. There's no baby dinosaurs that we have like a touching moment with. There's no singing brachiosaurs.
It's basically all just scary dinosaurs with a couple of benign dinosaurs here and there when they're sleeping in the tree. There's some hungry ankylosaurs. There's the dinosaurs on the river. And that's it.
But they're in the background.
They're in the background.
Sort of background is the sweetest they ever are is when they're in the background.
Yep. When we're able to focus on the characters and not them being almost killed.
So let's talk about the science, right? Moving on from the critters to talk about the paleontology in the movie. Sort of what's its attitude towards the science itself. We got another fossil site.
We did get another fossil site, and we have two paleontologists again.
We do. So, yeah, we have like 1.5.
1.5.
Billy's in training.
Yep, exactly. A paleontologist and his pupil.
Yes.
So we definitely got some scientists on there. We've got a fossil site. We do have part of a scientific lecture even shown, and
we do.
We have some discussion of their most recent findings and what those entail and things like that. It's there in the first 20 minutes.
Yes, there's actually a lot of interesting science stuff in those first... All my science notes come from the first 20 minutes.
First 20 minutes.
When they're at the fossil site, which is in Montana.
Yep.
I really like that Billy is talking to that young lady, and she says, "I can never tell what's rock and what's bone."
Yep.
Like, that's a real struggle.
Yep.
That's straight out of the field.
I like his response is also a good answer. Technically, it's all rock.
Yeah.
The minerals have replaced the calcium, so it's technically rock, but here's the technique. And I liked that was a cool moment that felt very much like an actual teaching someone how to dig for fossils.
Yes, while he's trying to hit on her in the blazing Montana heat around the dinosaur skeleton. Haven't we all, though? Yeah.
It's something we can all relate to.
My favorite thing, because it made me laugh, and it didn't make me laugh the last time I saw this movie, which was years ago, what Billy calls rapid prototyping.
Yes.
They scan the raptor skull, and they create this model of its resonating chamber. And I love that that's in there, because I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, that's silly.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, that's 3D printing.
Yep.
And we're doing stuff like that.
Yes, we are.
In real paleontology these days.
I did find it funny because in the movie, this was just something I noticed this time. They talk about the fact that the machine they're using carves away the material to form what they scanned.
Like it sculpts it.
How did it sculpt it hollow?
Yeah. It did. That is a thing.
That was something I noticed this time where I'm like, no. 3D printing, yeah, but no, not that.
Right. It's got acid, very strategically positioned.
Yes.
It slides through.
It's got little robot worms. Hands that
yes, nanobots.
But it's
a couple more years of this technology. Wait, yeah, if you're using that to print stuff, why aren't you digging with it?
And I also had that moment where this movie has a lot of interesting callbacks. They also have one of those. This one started with them using technology on a Velociraptor fossil to discover something about it, with Grant
very true
kind of begrudgingly about the technology. I just thought that was an interesting thing that they keep portraying these techno things at the fossil sites,
which is also that the field is in real life becoming more technological.
It is. And so yeah, they've got some cool moments. They talk about the resonating chamber and what it suggests for their behavior. They also talk more about how grant funding works, which is, I guess, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that Grant, the character, was like begging for funding.
Yeah,
at that thing. I do take slight issue, more than slight issue, with Grant, because Grant like finishes his talk like they were smarter than primates. I can tell because of their skulls.
Yep.
He's making these broad. Now, I guess to be fair, he's begging for funding.
So he may be trying to be flashy.
Maybe he's being flashy.
There was one thing I wanted to talk about with the science of this movie from a behind the scenes standpoint, because Jack Horner, who is the scientific
advisor.
Thank you. Advisor for both the previous movies and this one, in the behind the scenes and making of, talks a good bit. He talks about the fact that he was brought on very early on when they were making this movie and had a lot of suggestions on how to make things more representative of science. But it actually explains some of the plot points, especially with like the Spinosaurus and what happened with the T-Rex. Because one of the big things that happens in this movie, people, is that the Spinosaurus murders the T-Rex to replace it as the main big bad guy. And that, from the movie making standpoint, they were very clear that that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to bring in a new adversary that would one-up the T-Rex.
Get the T-Rex out of the way.
Yep.
New lady in town.
Some of the stuff that actually happens with the T-Rex and with the Spinosaurus are actually from Jack Horner's own personal hypotheses about these dinosaurs.
Yeah, he was pushing around these times for the notion of T-Rex as a scavenger.
So that's why when you first encounter T-Rex in this movie, it is eating a carcass.
Yep.
And because of this, he also posited that the Spinosaur was a more active predator, and it was bigger. And he even had a line where he said, if you can scale ferociousness with length, then... And he was saying, we can't actually tell their behavior, but if you do, then Spinosaurus is definitely more ferocious than T-Rex. But basically, he was trying to actively make Spinosaurus an active predatory dinosaur, while T-Rex was not actually.
Yeah, so you can see the touches of Jack Horner science in the film.
And so it's interesting because now we're seeing something that was at that time a very new concept for Jack himself, and not agreed upon by all of other paleontologists. So it's
very true.
It was an interesting thing for me, the fact that this movie was actually based off some controversials a little, but yeah, partially controversial dinosaur hypotheses.
Indeed. Speaking of real life scientists, we love in this franchise to talk about the way the movie portrays its scientists. Like you said, we've got two scientists. We've got Grant and we've got Billy. Billy is Grant's student. Dr. Grant is Dr. Grant.
And Ellie shows up at the very beginning of the movie, but she seems to be kind of out of the game.
Yeah, she doesn't do much science stuff. She talks to Grant a little bit about science and then kind of moves on.
Which is a bummer, because she was great.
It is a bummer, absolutely. I like Grant giving his talk. I think he does a very great impersonation of a paleontologist giving a talk.
Yeah, that was actually, it sounded very much like a real presentation.
I also like, in terms, there were two other things that stuck out to me as interesting scientist moments. Maybe even three other things. I like that he challenges Billy to classify the Spinosaurus.
Yes, I noticed that professor-student relationship.
And Billy guesses two other Spinosaurids.
Yes, he does.
Suchomimus and Baryonyx. I also like that Grant identifies the raptor eggs.
Yes.
He picks them up. Oh, this is Velociraptor. Yes, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You've not only have you actually seen them before.
Yep.
You're the paleontologist.
We still get some of those moments where he is analyzing the dinosaurs whilst running from them. When they're running from the Velociraptors, there's a moment where he's almost trying to translate what they might be saying because he can see they are actively talking to each other, and he's enraptured by it. He stops running from one at one point and has to be dragged on because he goes, "It's calling for help."
Yeah.
And so it's neat that we still get to see that.
On the other hand,
it's
actually funny because I was made to think about something you said earlier on in this franchise, where you pointed out that a common scientist's trope in movies is not analyzing what you're seeing, but explaining what's going on as though you have all the knowledge.
Yep. And boy, does Grant start to do that in this one.
Yes, he does.
It's weird because it's a definite switch. And there's some times where he says things and it's one of those where it's like, okay, what? I don't. The one that he says first is when they're in the plane and he's like, here over this side you can see a herd of brachiosaurs. It's like, all right, cool. It's like, and they're on the side, they're being led by the alpha male. What?
Yeah, how do you know that?
How do you know how to identify gender, the sex of a brachiosaur from a plane? And B, how do you know they're led by an alpha male? Like, you saw them for 12 seconds last time you were on one of these islands.
The part that kills me is at the end with the raptors.
Yeah, when he starts translating their behaviors.
They're challenging us.
Yes.
They want the eggs, otherwise we'd be dead already. And she thinks you stole the eggs. And he's doing that in the first movie. Most of what he did was observing and analyzing.
Yep.
And there were a couple of moments where he was saying, he made a sweeping statement about what was definitively happening. This movie, it's switched.
Yep.
A lot of what he's saying is he's the translator for
exactly. He somehow
what's
has
happening.
These inhuman insights into what the dinosaurs are thinking and what they're doing.
He's the smart one. He is here to tell us the intelligent things, and we know stuff. Even Billy does it. Billy does it once. I wrote down one that Billy does when he says that the raptors set a trap.
Yep, they set a trap, and it's also they make him the smart one in the fact that, and this is not unreasonable. It's that he could have this knowledge, but he wasn't shown to particularly have the knowledge beforehand. But he's also like the field guide. He's getting them through the jungle. He's the one who's immediately like, all right, we head to the coast for these reasons. We're going to follow the river. He's the man with the plan.
Which I guess, in fairness, that's why they brought them.
Yeah, but it's also one of those where it's like, that's not a paleontologist trait. Not all of us are Eagle Scouts or park rangers that know how to navigate a landscape. That stood out to me because that wasn't what he was in the first one. There weren't times where he was like, this is obviously what we have to do. He was pretty obviously just figuring it out as he went, trying to take care of the kids and trying to head in the right direction. He was not some expert jungle navigator, which they portray him as a little bit in this. And that adds to that thing of
he's towing that line of the knowing how to do lots of stuff, the uber scientist.
Billy's, for the most part, not terrible. He doesn't do a lot of anything very sciencey, one way or the other.
He gets a couple moments. So the scientists in this movie, again, they're this mixture of, there's some cool scientist moments, and then there's some of those hints of the more classic tropes of what you see.
From the first to the second to the third, we've definitely shifted more in this direction.
Yes, we're seeing Gradually a little bit more of the monster trends with the dinosaurs, a little bit more of the tropey, science-y stuff.
Yeah.
I think this is certainly the weakest scientifically of the movies up until this point.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that because all the scientific concepts that they mention are at the beginning, and then the only one that continues throughout is that the raptors are smart, which they do show cool things of the raptors being smart, like in them communicating and them working as a pack, but that's the only one that they carry throughout the movie.
Yeah, the science gets left at the door in a lot of ways. As with the last couple episodes, we like to spend most of the time talking about the bigger stuff, maybe a few examples here and there, but we do like to nitpick, so we like to give ourselves each just a quick moment to pick on something and have what we like to call mini rants. Will, would you like to mini rant?
I would. Mine has to do with two moments in this movie that are very similar in weird ways that add to that horror movie type feeling, that monster movie scenario. One is when they're parasailing off the back of the boat at the very beginning of the movie. The boat goes through some mist, and the boat gets jostled. And when it comes out of the mist, all the people on board are missing, and the canopy's been torn up, and obviously there's been an attack on the speeding boat out along the ocean that did not sink the boat. Somehow, and it's not innately said who did this, but it's pretty heavily suggested, I felt, that it was the Spinosaurus, since that's the monster of the movie, and it's shown to be aquatic. That's always what I assumed it was meant to be. But regardless of what it was, how did something get onto the boat, kill everyone, and then get off the boat without disrupting the boat at all, and just let it keep going? And then, after they land on the island, the kid gets out of the parachute, and the guy evidently dies right after the kid gets out of the parachute, because he's still in the parachute harness, where something killed him and then left his body there. And like, did it just kill him for the heck of it? Did he die for some unknown reason? Like, people keep dying in this movie with very thematic deaths that make no sense. These animals are very carefully murdering people without disrupting anything around them. And it's so weird, and it makes no sense. It makes for cool moments in the movie that are completely ridiculous. And it always bugged me.
My mini rant is the moment that made me come up with the idea to do mini rants.
Yes.
In these, because I couldn't otherwise justify complaining about this. Early on in the movie, they land the plane. A couple people they're standing on the side of the forest, and they hear a roar coming from the forest. And the camera zooms in dramatically. And Billy says, with all the confidence of someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about, "That's a Tyrannosaurus." And Grant says, with all the gravitas of the only interesting character in the movie, "I don't think so. Sounds bigger." I hate that line. I hate those two words. They are my least favorite two words in the entire franchise. Sounds bigger. Because the movie treats them like it's it's part of that monster, we're building everything up. Sounds bigger. What do you mean, sounds bigger? First of all, bring me a giraffe and a cicada, and I will teach you the folly of pretending you can tell the size of a creature from the noise it makes. Second of all, the Spinosaurus and the T-Rex are the same size. Like, yes, technically, one of them is going to be a little longer, and one of them might be heavier, but they're in the same weight class. Like, if they were wrestlers, they'd be in the same division.
Yes.
Even when they're fighting, they're pretty much the same. These are 6 or 7 ton animals. You're telling me you can hear the extra 500 pounds that one of them has on the other. And on top of that, Grant has only ever heard one large theropod. And I don't mean one species. I mean a single large theropod. How do you know what the different theropods sound like, and you can tell their size based on... And the movie treats it like such a big, fantastic moment, and it's dumb, and I hate it, and it's stupid. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us for this third episode in our franchise analysis of the Jurassic Park movies. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. As with the last couple episodes, we will continue this discussion after the science review into just some of our personal musings. As you can imagine, we have some on this movie. And those we put together as bonus content. We throw them up on Patreon because they're not so much science. There's not so much learning to be had. It's mostly just us chatting to each other. So if you're a patron, keep an eye out for that. If you're not a patron, hey, think about it. We will be back next week, as we have been doing every week this month, to talk about Jurassic World.
Yes.
The last one before we finish it up by going to see Fallen Kingdom.
Indeed.
So thank you for joining us, as always, and thank you in advance for hanging out with us next time as we continue.
Tune in then, folks.
Bye.
Bye.